Gareth Southgate has an enormous job of picking a squad to go to the Euros. We've just seen the last set of internationals where we've seen some new faces, some old faces, some faces that I think we're all desperate to see. That's what we're going to talk about. Which faces deserve to be in this England squad? Because I think he's fortunate and unfortunate in this case. He could pick 50 players, genuinely could pick 50 players. But we know Gareth Southgate has a style. We know he likes to pick certain players. But there's a few, say in the Kobe Mainu ilk, we're not going to talk about him, that maybe deserve a look in. Does anyone stick out to you, Harry?
Curtis Jones is the one. It is the name that kind of jumped off the page to me because, you know, he's been really good for Liverpool this season and he's been able to do a variety of things in that Liverpool midfield. Jurgen Klopp's midfields over the years have been all action, right? You're not just a 6 in a lot of cases. You're not just an 8. You're not just a 10. You've got to do a bit of everything. And I think that Curtis Jones has showed that he's got a really well-rounded skill set. And squads for tournaments are very different to picking club squads. People always bash Gareth Southgate and say he doesn't have a style. Very difficult to implement a style when you only have those players a handful of times per year. So I think it's important to have players that are adaptable and it's important to have players that can fill in multiple roles. And I think Curtis Jones ticks all of those boxes. And if he continues this season in the way he's been playing, for some of the names that we're going to talk about a little bit later on to be in the squad and him not, I think there's a problem there.
Whose spot do you think he takes? Because I think I agree that Curtis Jones provides a different element in midfield, and he's done very, very well for the under-21s for quite a while now, and he's got a great set of. I think you always say, is it a Swiss Army knife? That reference, you love that reference. Yeah. That's basically what Curtis Jones is. But then I look at that squad and going, Southgate probably needs a 6. He's got Jude, he's got Maddison, he's got Rice. I actually think like Rice is in a similar ilk that he can do lots of different facets of the game. Jude could do the same. Foden might play centrally. So is Curtis Jones just like the 23rd man that we're taking because he has to take someone?
Maybe. I'm not saying that he should start in every single game, but I think about, like you mentioned, the profile of midfielders. You got Rice, who's a clear 6. You got Calvin Phillips, who we'll probably touch on a bit later on, who is a 6 for me. Then you've got your Fodens, your Maddisons that are all 10s. And then 8s. I don't really think England have that. And Southgate might make the case that Henderson could be that. But nowadays, you know, there's only one performing at the level whereby they should be considered for a tournament squad. And that's Curtis Jones.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think Curtis Jones, I've always liked him. He's always passed the eye test, but you've seen him be a little bit more effective this season. And I like what he brings to the table. I don't know if he will go. A player that I want to argue for, though, is Raheem Sterling. And I know that his PR's at an all-time low right now. We saw the disaster class in the FA Cup. That free kick's been replayed multiple times, where I still don't think it's come down yet. But he's a player that has never really let England down. At the Euros, when we got to final, he was England's best player. Scored an important goal against Germany, probably our most significant knockout win in Gareth Southgate's tenure as England manager. And in a season that's been a disaster for Raheem Sterling, people have made out that he hasn't done anything for Chelsea. He scored 6 goals and got 6 assists. Marcus Rashford's got 7 goals and 3 assists. I don't know why Rashford is definitively ahead of Sterling in the pecking order. Sterling's done more for England. I think that he's done more in his career. He's more proven. And I feel like if you're an opposition team and you're looking in the tunnel and you see that Raheem Sterling's starting the game for England, I think he strikes more fear just because of his pedigree and reputation than the Marcus Rashford. We don't know why. What, because of Rashford's... Are you doubting it because of Rashford's pacing behind?
Yeah, and also I think, yes, Rashford in front of goal definitely isn't as clinical as Sterling. But I do think if you've got Rashford on the other side and you're a right back and you're against Sterling, I think Rashford's at this point more dynamic and so therefore more dangerous.
See, I disagree. I feel like if you see Raheem Sterling against the best full-back or best right back in the world, in my opinion, in Kyle Walker, both home and away, he gave him fits. And he turned Kyle Walker in and out more than I've ever seen anyone turn Kyle Walker in and out. And so I think Raheem Sterling, when it comes to taking on his fullback, I think he strikes more fear because he does more things. His issue is that, I don't know, there's been some sort of fallout between him and Southgate. We've seen Southgate select players for his England squad that, in my opinion, don't deserve to be there. Raheem Sterling, a player who served him so well in Southgate's tenure as England manager, has seemed to be falling out of favour, and we've not seen him play for England since he returned, or he played against France in the quarterfinals, came off the bench. We haven't seen him play for England since the World Cup, and so there seems to be a bit of a fallout there. But for me, if there's a player on this list I think you should take based on reputation, Raheem Sterling's top of that list.
I agree with that. I think people always talk about what a great man manager Gareth Southgate is. There's been a lot of fallings out with Gareth Southgate's staff, maybe not him directly, but with his staff. And there's a lot of players, as Kweku says, that have been in that squad that simply don't deserve to be there. I accept your point that Rashford has more pace and maybe is a little bit more dynamic, drifts in field a little bit more into that sort of makeshift centre-forward position and can do damage there. But I think when you play against the very elite nations in the latter stages of the competition, which is where England should be aiming to get, you need somebody with a bit more guile, who's a bit cuter in the way he does things. And I think Raheem Sterling, the way he cut inside Kyle Walker in the game at the Etihad not so long ago, that kind of thing. Sterling has that in his locker, and I would put him ahead of Rashford at the moment as well.
I'd say there's slightly more pressing matters in the England team because obviously we have so many options going forward. But look, England don't have a six. Calvin Phillips, natural six, before people start saying, gotta be Mainoo. Calvin Phillips is probably the natural fix. Now, he's so out of form since he's gone to West Ham because he hasn't played for a while. But if he has 10 good games now, or let's say 10 good to great games between now and the end of the season, if you put your Southgate hat on, Southgate probably takes him because we're talking about Henderson as potentially an 8. I don't think Henderson's a 6. I don't think Kobe Mainoo's a 6. Conor Gallagher's not a 6. Who else we got in midfield?
It's Declan Rice is the
Rice.
Standout 6.
Yeah, I feel like it's so interesting because you always want to favour players going forward. But I think if Declan Rice was to get injured, England would be screwed because England have got so many talented players, and you need a 6 that's. I'm not saying that this is Declan Rice's strongest ability, but comfortable to receive the ball in the half turn and go and play. And I think Declan Rice can definitely prove on that. But beyond that, there's nobody can do it. I don't feel confident in Calvin Phillips doing that. And if England don't have a midfield to play or midfielder to play through, they're not getting anywhere in the Euros. And so. I don't know. I wouldn't take Calvin Phillips because I don't necessarily think he's got the ability to play in a world-class midfield. But beyond Declan Rice, I don't know who you take.
It's interesting because Gareth Southgate has trusted Calvin Phillips in the past, but he's been left with no choice but to leave him out in the recent games because he's not been playing, and when he has, since moving to West Ham, it's been a disaster, right? That's the honest truth of it. But then what's the other option? And for that reason, I think Phillips, if he does have a good end to the season, could find himself in the squad, not because he deserves it, but because in terms of having another number 6, I don't think England have one. People will say that Kobe Mainoo could play that role. And yes, he's great at getting on the ball and receiving it on the half turn. Technically, he's top. Yeah. But defensively, when you're up against it, would you back Kobe Mainoo, an inexperienced young man? Would you throw him into that position? Southgate's shown for years that he's really risk averse, and I can't see him taking a gamble like that. I think Mainoo will go, but I think there's a good chance that Calvin Phillips goes too.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I just don't like the idea of Calvin Phillips being the deputy to Declan Rice in that midfield. I think it's just inherently negative. And I feel like if you look at the best teams at major tournaments, I know players don't necessarily... Well, I look at France, for example, World Cup final. The midfield was Tchouaméni, Rabiot and Griezmann. You wouldn't say there's necessarily a clear number 6 there. I know Tchouaméni, probably that is the position you'll end up playing for Real Madrid. But if you're good enough to play in midfield, I think you're good enough to play in different positions. For me personally, and I know Kobe Mainoo's PR is at an all-time high right now, if you have to deputise someone for Declan Rice, I think you put Kobe Mainoo, drop him deeper. You have Jude Bellingham as one of the other 8s, and then you can find another midfielder who's an 8. We've got way more 8s than we've got 6s. I don't think Calvin Phillips should be on the play.
See, I think Southgate would, if he lost Declan Rice, I think he would abandon this idea of playing 1-6, and I think he'd try and play 2, and he'd try and bring someone else in.
Ward-Prowse, brother.
Maybe.
Ward-Prowse playing next to him. That's I have a tactical fix for this.
Nice and boring.
Yeah. A tactical fix, instead of requiring a 6, is to invert one of your fullbacks. Obviously, Trent probably will play at right back, but if he doesn't, he might end up being the 6. Joe Gomez as your left back. Hear me out. Ben Chilwell is not in great form. Luke Shaw's constantly injured, and although he's great for England, it's a gamble. Joe Gomez has inverted as a fullback for Liverpool brilliantly this season. He's very good in possession. He can play all along the back four. I'd be shocked if out of the names we've mentioned, he's the one that misses out completely. Because I think England don't have left backs that stay fit. They could probably do with cover at centre back. I think Tomori's on this list, but he's really not been informed this season. Livramento's on this list, but again, he's a backup option. So then you go in, who can you plug and play in these games and he can handle the situation? Joe Gomez.
Yeah. I agree with you that that's the best option currently, given the injury problems that England have at left back. If Luke Shaw's fit, he's the number 1 left back for me. If not, then Gomez is probably the next best thing. But I still believe that Gareth Southgate would rather play Kieran Trippier there and move him from right to left.
Brother, it's
then pick his
2024.
But we're talking about Gareth Southgate here. And this is, he's done well with England overall. When you look at where they've got to, he's done fine. But this is the kind of thing that frustrates people, I think, is that he's got his group of players that he really trusts and really believes in, and he's going to trust them above someone else who, in his eyes, is untried and untested at that level.
All right, we'll let the comments decide. I have just thought of another name, Harvey Elliott. How has this man not had a chance yet? But you guys let us know in the comments below if there's anyone else outside of the names we've mentioned.